In a desperate move to rescue a sinking campaign tied to the anchor of Project 2025, Donald Trump selected never-Trumper JD Vance from Ohio as his vice presidential running mate. Now, Trump bypassed two candidates of color to make this choice, each of which could have peeled potential Democratic voters away from Biden. So why, instead, did he choose to hire a former vocal critic? Vance is on record for having excoriated Trump in the 2016 presidential race, saying that Trump is cultural heroin. He also said, "I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place." And he was right. But this supposed spokesperson for the white working class ended up doing a complete 180 on Trump in order to get Trump's endorsement in the 2022 Senate race. And it worked, but not before Trump humiliated Vance at a rally. Let's take a look.
And then the New York Times did a fake story today, big front page, that JD wasn't sure if he wanted my support. JD is kissing my ass. He wants my support. So I'm 18 points up.
So what is the price of a Senate seat? Well, I don't know how much money the 2022 race cost, but it cost JD Vance his dignity. And people think Tim Scott is a bootlicker. Not only did Vance have to pirouette to do a 180, he had to completely debase himself to win a Senate seat. And here's the interesting thing about JD. Why did he do it? Why the turnaround? What happened to the working class savior of the working class? Well, to start with, JD Vance may come from a working class background, but he's a Yale University Law School grad who went on to work for Mithril Capital, a venture capital firm run by billionaire Peter Thiel. Thiel is one of the most anti-democratic venture capitalists you can imagine, and that is saying something. So is it the money that made Vance turn on the working class? And not so much. It was something way more personal. Remember, Vance was a Trump critic in 2016. So what happened? Well, according to Politico, in November 2020, 1 week after the presidential election, Netflix released a film adaptation of Hillbilly Elegy, directed by Ron Howard and starring Gabriel Basso as Vance, Glenn Close as his mama, and Amy Adams as Bev Vance. The movie, based on Vance's best-selling book, was widely panned, with The New Yorker calling it a libertarian's fantasy. Friends of Vance have said that the negative reaction to the film was the last straw of Vance's estrangement from elite liberal society. So now you know one reason why Trump likes Vance. In addition to being submissive, he's a narcissist enacting revenge fantasies, just like Trump. And also just like Trump, Vance is a big proponent of Project 2025, especially in terms of being anti-women. And here is where it becomes so difficult to critique these far-right extremists. Because when you say things like, he wants to turn this country into the Handmaid's Tale, it sounds like you're engaging in hyperbole. Okay, so I'll just let the video speak for itself, and you decide if this doesn't sound like a vision of the Handmaid's Tale. Apologies in advance for the bad sound. It's the fault of the original recording.
But I mean, culturally, something has clearly shifted. I mean, I think it's easy, but also probably true to blame the sexual revolution of the 1960s. You know, my grandparents had an incredibly chaotic marriage in a lot of ways, but they never got divorced, right? They were together to the end, till death do us part. That was a really important thing to my grandmother and my grandfather. That was clearly not true by the 70s or 80s. And I think that probably, you know, I was personally, and a lot of the kids in my community grew up in my generation, personally suffered from the fact that a lot of moms and dads saw marriage as a basic contract, right? Like any other business deal. Once it becomes no longer good for one of the parties or both of the parties, you just dissolve it and go on to a new business relationship. But that recognition that marriage was sacred, I think, was a really powerful thing that held a lot of families together. And when it disappeared, unfortunately, a lot of kids suffered. And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, you know, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages. And I think that's what all of of us should be honest about is we've run this experiment in real time, and what we have is a lot of very, very real family dysfunction that's making our kids unhappy. There's a very specific policy that I've actually become a very big fan of, and it's been tried in Hungary and a couple of other countries, where basically what they do, and it's both to send a material signal, but also just send a cultural signal from leadership that marriage is really important. What they basically do is that every new couple, when they get married, they get a low interest loan that is from the government, and you have to pay it back. But you don't have to pay it back if you get married and stay married for a certain period of time.
So to be clear, women should have to stay in abusive marriages, they should reproduce more, and they should be happy with that because the alternative is a leftist lie. So we should copy dictators to keep women in their place. Okay, JD, what other crazy do you have for us? Well, let's listen to what a Yale alum has to say about universities.
That we should understand this is that the left-wing indoctrination in our society, it starts somewhere. Like, where does it come from? I think we have to locate where the cancer comes from. And unfortunately, I think the answer is our universities. The universities are the place where the tumor is located, and it's spreading all over our society. Because whatever names we're going to get called, we have got to cut off the flow of funding to the universities that are indoctrinating our children. Look, a lot of countries in different parts of the world have basically said, if you want to take federal money or you want to take government money, you need to teach stuff that's in the public interest. And you need to stop teaching, American children that their country is evil and racist and that they should hate it. That's basic common sense. If we're going to spend money on these universities, they should have to teach things that are consistent with our values and with our worldview.
Defund universities that don't toe to the conservative line? What a hypocrite and a fraud. And what a nightmare vision he's proposing. But it doesn't stop there. Here he is being anti-science and lying about the COVID vaccine.
We should not be requiring people to take the vaccine. I have advised people in my family to get vaccinated. I'm not against vaccination. I think that for a lot of people it makes a lot of sense, but at the end of the day, that should be your choice. And look, it's a new vaccine. It's still relatively experimental in nature. The crazy thing that's going on is that the vaccine mandates, I think, have totally warped our understanding of this virus. At the end of the day, should we require a 19-year-old who's already had COVID, so they already have natural immunity, to put an experimental vaccine into their body? I don't think there's any scientific or health reason to justify that.
Anti-women, anti-higher education, anti-science, and willing to say anything to be elected. So all those things certainly made him a great candidate for Trump. But the number one criteria was something else. Here's the real reason Trump picked Vance. Let's listen to Vance's audition for VP on ABC's.
There, but you didn't answer the question I asked. Would you have certified the election results had you been vice president?
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. That is the legitimate way to deal with an election that a lot of folks, including me, think had a lot of problems in 2020.
Now, what's so funny about Trump choosing Vance because he said he'd do Trump's bidding is that Trump is a fool here. Well, he's a fool constantly, but particularly here. Vance is a political opportunist. If it comes to a choice of making Trump president or in some way giving Vance more power or even better opportunity, he won't hesitate to screw Trump. Donnie, you picked someone smarter than you, someone more articulate than you, and someone who can grab the spotlight from you. Dude, the potential that he is going to screw you is the only silver lining in this choice. I'm Anthony Vincent Gallo for Occupy Democrats.